Let me fix this right there. I'm doing this on my phone because I'm poor. So, for transparency, I have recorded a dozen versions of this video. I keep going on tangents, tirades, rambles. So, I'm going to do my best to stick to the script here. So, apologies if I sound a little stiff, a little robotic, but I really want to make sure I get all my points across. I may dabble a little bit into my rambles, but my goal is to be clear, concise with my messaging and not to belittle anybody. So I initially gave up on my YouTube aspirations. However, given recent events, I've been reinvigorated to pursue content creation. So for those of you who watched my Bible read-throughs, first of all, God bless, thank you. But look forward to some new videos in the near future because I am going to continue that. And I want to go ahead and apologize ahead of time for my terrible pronunciation of names and places. I am not a Bible scholar. I'm not a scholar of any kind. I'm a poor father of four. That's it. I'm poor, father of four. Those two things describe me accurately. However, today, I want to talk to my fellow One Piece fans. Now, I am going to make this video broad enough to encompass anyone who has not watched One Piece. I'm going to do my best to explain and elaborate some of the terms that I use as they come from the One Piece material. And I also want to acknowledge that I do recognize that the majority of One Piece fans, well, anime and manga fans in general, are overwhelmingly liberal, if not just far left. Okay, I do understand that. So this is going to be pretty contentious for those who have the IQ of a goldfish. So bear with me. So Charlie Kirk's assassination and the One Piece community's response to it was very shocking, to say the least. I've seen some egregious content, memes, posts about the situation, so much so that I really could not cope with the idea that I was in the same quote-unquote community as individuals who would act so vile, right? Would be so vile in a situation like that. And I was talking to my brother, and he said something that was very, very enlightening to me. He said, well, it's no coincidence that the One Piece fandom is generally left and they don't like Fishman Island and Skypiea. Now, for those who don't know, aren't familiar with those terms, those are two arcs or two parts of the story, I guess you could say, two books, quote unquote, of the One Piece series. Skypiea is about an indigenous people trying to reclaim their land, their ancestral homeland, from people who have been living there generationally. Fishman Island is about how prejudice and hate can be inherited by those who have never experienced prejudice and or hate. So sticking with Fishman Island for a second, the main villain being Hody Jones, he had never been a victim of prejudice for humans. He had never experienced hate from humans. However, he inherited the hate and the prejudice from the people he looked up to. So much so, he was so radicalized in his ideology, it led him to assassinate Otihime, the queen of Fishman Island. Does that sound familiar? Now, going to the Skypiea side of things, the whole point of that is that the people today cannot answer for the crimes, the historical crimes of their ancestors. Yes, our ancestors stole this land, but that was 1,000 years ago. Not really, but it's 400 years ago in the story, which ironically enough, here in America, we're at that around that 400-year mark, right? Not really, we're at 300 years, but still 400-year mark. And there was an ancestral people here Our ancestors came in and took it from those people, and now we have contention. Should the people today be penalized for the crimes of yesterday? The crimes of 1,000 years ago, 400 years ago? Now, the obvious answer to that is no. Anyone with their right mind would say, no, you should not be penalized for the sins of your father. That has nothing to do with you. But the leftist ideology, they can't wrap their head around that. So let's go back to Charlie Kirk's assassination. First of all, the amount of lies spread about this man is truly astounding. I've seen people say that he deserved his death. He was asking for it. He said some things that were controversial. These people go as far to compare him to a celestial dragon. So let's stop right there. What is a celestial dragon? For the One Piece fans, you know. But for those who don't watch One Piece, I'm going to elaborate. The celestial dragons are the descendants of 20 kings, 20 kingdoms who came together to found what they call the world government. The world government. Their descendants, the celestial dragons, are essentially a higher class of people. They can do whatever they want. They have rights and privileges that lower class individuals, aka everybody else who's not a celestial dragon, they cannot exploit. So for example, a celestial dragon can walk into your house and say, I like this house, I'm taking it. Oh, and I like your wife, I'm taking her. They typically ride around on their slaves. We've seen them use humans as a mode of transportation. And when that transportation doesn't meet their needs, they kill them. Indiscriminately, no care in the world. Let me ask you this. Does that sound like Charlie Kirk? Was Charlie Kirk out here enslaving people, taking people's wives and property, killing random people? If your answer to that is yes, you're a moron. You're nuts. And you've been captured by your ideology. Charlie Kirk is not a celestial dragon. But Charlie Kirk is a racist. He said mean things about black women. First of all, I've heard that talking point a million times. If you go back and watch what he said specifically, he brought up 4 women specifically, all who happen to be black, who he said were DEI hires and didn't deserve their job. Now, I'm not going to get into all that. That's not what this video is about. But if you go watch that video and then put it together with some more context surrounding those situations, you would know for a fact that 1, what he said was true, and 2, that even if he was wrong, let's just say that he was wrong what he said, that they weren't DEI hires, they themselves said that they were DEI hires. Okay? So I encourage you to think for yourself, watch the video for yourself, and follow up with other points so that you can come to a well-rounded idea, opinion, conclusion. But I also want to ask this. Let's just say he did say something racist. Let's just say he just straight up called her the N-word. Does that give someone the right to kill him? So let me ask you this. Should someone be able to kill you when you say something mean towards another person or a people group? If you said, Malcolm, you're ugly, can I come over there and kill you? I have the right to blow your head off? No. And you know it. Charlie was a fascist. Well, let's start with fascism. Let's define what fascism is. Google says this, and I wrote it down. Ultranationalist, authoritarian political ideology and movement that emphasizes the nation or race over individual rights. Let's break it down a little bit by little bit. Ultranationalist. Now, I think we can both agree that Charlie Kirk could be defined as a nationalist. Now, the ultra part, I don't know that I can give him that because I know from what I saw that he was very pro-Israel. I feel like an ultra-nationalist doesn't care about any other country except for his or her own, right? An ultra-nationalist doesn't care about Israel, right? So I think we can take the ultra out, but yeah, I would argue, yeah, he's probably a nationalist. Now, what is a nationalist? Well, that's someone who prioritizes the benefit of their own country over other countries. You mean every human being on Earth? Every country except for the Western Hemisphere? Only white countries are supposed to hate themselves. But every other country can take pride, dignity, and patriotism for their own country. But no, not the white countries. You have to hate yourself. You have to neuter yourself. All right, let's move on. Now, was he an authoritarian? Now we need to define that again. Here's the simple definition. Favoring complete obedience or subjection to authority as opposed to individual freedom. Well, given that Charlie was a First and Second Amendment absolutist, that debunks the authoritarian political ideology part. I encourage you to find anything on Charlie Kirk talking about the Second Amendment, and you know what he always says? He says that the Second Amendment is fundamentally important so that we can defend ourselves from a potentially tyrannical government. So he believes that your individual rights, or he believed that your individual right to protect yourself was more important than the reign of the federal government. That is the definition of anti-authoritarianism. So he's not an ultranationalist. He's not an authoritarian. So I have to ask this. Even if that was the case, do you think it justifies that he was shot in the head? Or shot in the neck, sorry? If that's what you think, I don't know what to tell you. The irony here is Charlie Kirk is a lot more like Otahime, the Queen of Fishman Island. Otahime, if you're a One Piece fan, you know that Otahime was going to her people trying to petition them to change their hearts and minds in a certain direction. Now she wanted to go bring the fish people above land to the sun, but that's not part of this discussion. That's really not that important. It's the principle. Otahime used her words to change the hearts of the people around her. So much so that she was able to change the heart of a celestial dragon. You know, the people that you compare Charlie Kirk to. Charlie used his words to change the hearts and minds of the people that he encountered. Both Otahime and Charlie were killed for their beliefs, for speaking, for wanting to have a conversation. So, I say all of that to say this. Fishman Island is a great representation of what happened to Charlie Kirk, particularly the Otahime section. And it's very ironic to me that the people who call themselves One Piece fans, I'm nuanced, I'm able to read into things. They would, on the other side of the aisle, say that Charlie Kirk's assassination was justified, but criminalize and hate someone like Hody Jones as the villain of the Fishman Island arc because he wasn't that great of a villain. Now, that's whether or not you think he was a good villain, that's on you. So I say all that to say this: Sky Island teaches us that the people of today should not be punished for the crimes committed historically. I have nothing to do with what my grandfather did. Fishman Island teaches us that not only one race of people was subject to prejudice or subject to slavery. It teaches that hate can be taught. It teaches that hate can radicalize. But it also teaches at the end of the day, we all bleed the same. So with that, I hope you enjoyed my video. I look forward to making more content in the future. God bless.